Today's a very special day for us funeral directors. I know we all love the Mortuary Show. We come out on every Tuesday, never fails, but today's a special episode. It's Monday. Well, why are we coming out with an episode on Monday? Well, today, as hopefully many of us know, is National Funeral Directors Day. A special day where we pay tribute to all the things that most of us morticians do on a day-to-day basis. We're a lot of times the unsung heroes that go through people's lives during the most critical times, and we perform tasks that most of the entire world would never ever consider doing. And at the same time, we do it with a grace and for the love of our families and our community. And we do it with so much passion, all of us. And the community that we have in funeral services like none other. And we all share that common bond of wanting to stick together and help the people we surround ourselves with. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Danielle Knapp. She's been on an episode previously, and she's doing something really special as a tribute for the work that us funeral directors do, specifically in some special circumstances. So today we want to talk about a lot about what we do on a day-to-day basis and getting some acknowledgement for the things that we do, because our work is super special and we deserve to get that recognition from not only internally in our community but as well from the outside. We are hard workers, as we know. We're 24/7, and we deserve to have a pat on the back once in a while, because we really don't get it too much. So Danielle, give us a little bit about what your ideas are and your dreams for giving us that recognition.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on again. I appreciate it, and this is very special for me, just given not necessarily just the event that we're working on for our convention this year, but in general to be able to say thank you to funeral directors and the work that they do every single day without that pat on the back. And and you well know, they don't go to work looking for that pat on the back. They go to work because they love what they do. And, I had a gentleman that we interviewed that basically, he said it best. He said, we're kind of like the moth to the flame, and we go there and we get our job done and we get out. And so when I began my career, this next career step, I guess, as the CEO for the Iowa Funeral Directors Association, I started looking at some of the things that were in the office. And one of the things that I had come across was a big tote, a couple of them actually, that contained memorabilia, stories, articles, videos, pictures, everything of the Flight 232 crash in Sioux City, Iowa, that took place on July 19th, 1989. And I kept, I remember it, and I remember it happening, but not a lot of the details. So I started reading it, and what kind of struck me was everybody was acknowledged in some way, shape, or form, from the deceased all the way through, the Red Cross and the FBI and the United staff, right? Everybody but the funeral director. And I found two articles that were written about the funeral director, but they were written by the funeral director. Right. And so it really just I sat on the floor in my office, and I just read through everything and looked at the pictures, and it broke my heart, because I thought, just because you don't go into it looking for the recognition doesn't mean that you shouldn't get that recognition. And it really, by looking through everything, it just dawned on me that I really needed to do something. And so I was thinking about, this was in 2022. I was like, well, in 2024, and here we are already, which seems impossible, that it would be 35 years since that crash. And it was just time. And I knew a lot of these funeral directors from my 23 years in funeral service. I started my career here in Iowa, and I got to thinking about them and thinking about, everything that funeral directors went through during COVID. And I was with Parklawn at the time, and know what they all went through with trying to get families served, and funeral directors were flying all over the country to help another funeral home out. It was just
Sure.
kind of crazy. And so I felt like I wanted to find a way to just say thank you um, to these funeral directors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it started off pretty small. I thought, well, let's just do something at convention and say thank you and honor them and recognize them. And most people that know me, or know me well anyway, know that I kind of think big and I have a big vision, and then I
You
have
don't
to
do
reel
anything half go.
no, no. And I knew that somebody was going to have to reel me back a little bit and say, okay, we got to go a little slower. And that's fine, because I think that's what works best, is when you have that balance.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of said, you know what, let's put a little video. Let's reach out to these funeral directors that are still living. And that's the other thing that's kind of struck a chord with me, Michael, was
Yeah.
I knew a lot of those people and they were deceased. And then I was
Yeah.
looking at the ones that were still alive, and it was just hard on my soul.
How
And
many?
so let's get as many together as we possibly can, and let's do kind of a video tribute. And then I was at convention and just having conversation with some people from Funeral Directors Life that I knew, and they're like, we would love to help you with this, and what's your vision? And of course I told them the big vision, and they said, you know, if you want our help, we're on board. And I said, let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it started.
It's such a beautiful thing that you're doing, because we don't get that recognition. It's a rare occasion that a family's going to come up to us and give us that pat on the back, and as us morticians know, that will make our day. When you're facing the
Yeah.
times of burnout and the times of challenge, when a family comes up to you and says, like, you really knocked it out of the park. Like, this was the most beautiful tribute that I could have ever had for mom, or saying dad has not looked this good in 15 years. Those little things, firsthand experience, will take you through the hardest of times. So what you're
Yeah.
trying to do is take it to the next level. There's not that many funeral directors, thankfully, that have to deal with these traumatic, huge incidences. But
Yeah.
when one happens in your geographical area, like you said, we are moths to a flame. Like, we want to go help because we know that they need it. Tell me a little bit more about, I guess, the accident. How many people did end up passing away, and how many funeral directors had to come in to help assist in the whole situation for the flight
Yeah.
crash?
So yeah, this it's pretty miraculous. It's tragic and miraculous all in the same sentence.
Yeah.
So it was a DC-10 that had left Denver, going to go through Chicago onto Philadelphia, and there
Okay.
were 296 individuals on board, and um, they basically lost. It was um, the tail mounted engine where they lost failure and lost hydraulics and things like that. And so they definitely went on this, and to see the picture of the flight path is unbelievable.
Oh.
And so it kind of went through these crazy loop de loops around over Iowa. And at one point in time, they talked about landing in Sioux Falls on just the interstate or the highway, and they're like, no, let's bring them back down towards Sioux City. And so they did. And anyway, so it was they were on their way ultimately to Philadelphia, and it was the largest single fatality that United Flight has had. But I also think you have to look at the flip side of it. Even though it was the largest fatality they've ever had, there was 296 on board, 112 died, but 184 lived. And unbelievably, there were 13 people on that plane that were completely uninjured. Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, and so to hear that in itself, and they recorded the landing, and so to watch the videos of this plane coming in and the actual crash back in 1989. Now it's so much different now, because like we know
Right.
stuff before it happens, it seems like, and
Yeah.
we can be there. But back in 1989, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have any of that. And so as we were looking at how we would present this, I really wanted to not focus on the crash, but we have to acknowledge the crash because that's why
Right.
these funeral directors were there.
Of
All in
course.
all, there were about 125 that volunteered from Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, and um, one of the gentlemen that we interviewed, lovely man, David Kramer, they actually flew in from Eastern Iowa and flew right over the plane crash and um, just really amazing things. And so all these funeral directors are called. They had no idea really what they were getting themselves into. They just said, bring your tools, bring chemicals, bring cars, bring whatever.
Yeah.
And they did, and they showed up. And one of the things I think, other than that, they didn't get that acknowledgement is as funeral directors, you are not just called to care for the deceased, you're also called to care for the living. And that's the missing piece of this puzzle is
Mhm.
these funeral directors did not get to care for the living, they had to care for the dead. And back then, before D. Mort stepped in and kind of changed some things and the identification processes and procedures changed, it wasn't so pleasant on
Yeah.
how they had to identify these individuals. And so, what
What
a
did
funeral
that like? What did that entail for the funeral?
and that was mandated. They had to remove the lower jaw and one of the fingertips for identification.
Yeah, that's
That is
gotta
not what
be
funeral directors do. We don't,
no,
you don't do that. You put
no.
people back together so loved ones can say their final goodbye to somebody.
Yeah,
And
we're
so,
more of puzzle piece doers than the
right,
makers.
right. And so as I'm thinking about these things, I'm like, how awful that they really couldn't do a lot of what their heart wants to do. And
Right.
so, but they took it upon themselves to each
Wrap up.
body was identified, and most of those bodies could have been open casket if it hadn't been for that.
Wow.
Probably at least
That's
half of
tough.
them could have been open casket. So, but here's the the wonderful thing, and when you really think about the process, they they got the decedent. They were identified in multiple ways. And they got to where the funeral directors were, and these funeral directors did their job, and they got the bodies embalmed. They got them cleaned up. They got them casketed. All 112 were put in caskets that were provided by Batesville. Well, they weren't provided by, I guess, they were all put in 112. All 112 were put in caskets that that were purchased from Batesville, basically, and then each person was put into the back end of a hearse and delivered to the appropriate airport to fly home to their loved one. So
That's
there was not they didn't just go, okay, well, we can put 10 people in 10 caskets in the back of a semi or a van and take them to the
yeah,
airport. Each one of these people were identified. They were treated with the care that they deserve.
yeah.
And able to go home to their loved ones. The big thing, though, was that the loved ones waiting for them to return didn't get to see them.
That's gotta be so hard, especially
Yeah,
for a freak thing that you would never expect to happen, and
correct.
then you don't get to see them. It's horrifying, and it's terrible from the funeral director's perspective too, because like you were saying, or you were going down this road, I could feel you going down it. These funeral directors that volunteered, they were able to help on the back end of things, but weren't able to have that connection on the front end to know that they had the impact that they actually did. They weren't able to really have that discussion with the families because I assume many of the families were either from Colorado or from Philadelphia or wherever else it could have been. So that had to be challenging in itself. And then did they have one hub? Like, were all these bodies going to one hub and they were all working together in one
Yeah,
place? Or it was, wow.
yeah. So because everything happened right there at the airport,
Yeah.
they took the hangars and they made them into makeshift morgues and embalming
What?
space. And
No
oh yeah,
kidding.
and so everything happened right there. No bodies were removed from the airport site. Um, it it functioned really well for some, again, back in 1989, and we didn't have the communication systems like we do
Yeah.
now. We didn't have internet and things like that.
Yeah.
It all functioned really, really well. They went
Just
hot.
embalm them on the plane. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow.
we had one gentleman, and when we talked to him about this, he was kind of shocked.
Yeah.
He put in 122 hours in 5.5 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So they put in their time, and they came in and they did their job, and they went home and they went right back to work, and they never really, um,
Get to sit with it. Yeah.
they never really sat and talked about it.
Yeah.
And that's the other
Yeah.
thing I don't think we do well in this profession is we don't do the debriefing like the fire departments do and like the police departments do. We don't do the
Right.
debriefing, and
Because it's on to the next thing. It's always, no, we got
it's
more, we
on to
got
the
more and
next thing.
more. And
Yeah.
we're trying to do that with the things that both of us work on. We're trying to help break it down, but it's hard to do that. Like it's hard
Correct.
to take that time because you'd rather have that time getting away. You know what I'm saying? Rather than
Right.
there's not much downtime. And when there is downtime, the last thing you're going to want to do is like sit around and probably talk. You want to be just able to like enjoy that downtime. So that's
Yeah.
probably the biggest difference.
Yeah. So when we went out on the interviews, it was in December, and in December in Iowa is always a little risky, but it happened to be
Oh yeah.
nice weather. So we went to Sioux City and actually did some footage at the museum. We did some footage downtown on the Riverwalk where the statues
Cool.
are, and we did some interviews right there in the museum.
Nice.
And um, it was, I knew it was going to be impactful. I just didn't realize how much. And to hear their stories, to hear what they experienced, where they were when they got the call, what made them feel compelled to go,
Yeah.
what happened afterwards. And a lot of them haven't ever talked about it really. And
Sure.
so there were a lot of emotions. They Everybody gave generously of their time. So we did 3 days of interviews and across Iowa. We definitely could have done more, had
I'm
time
sure.
and everything allowed, but it was just trying to coordinate in the middle of everything else. But um, I so I got to see the rough draft here a few weeks ago, and it's pretty amazing because it's incorporated the interviews with some of the footage the from the
Right.
accident, and so from there, I really just kind of started thinking about. I've had the absolute pleasure of working with hundreds of funeral directors across the state of Iowa. I've had two incredible job opportunities that I've been able to do that, and it really made me start thinking about the people elsewhere that have been through these experiences. Whether you're looking at Oklahoma or 9/11, or there was a plane crash in Dallas, or, there's all these other
Right.
scenarios out there that were these funeral directors ever acknowledged or recognized or thanked. And as I started talking to people, they're like,
Right.
nobody's ever really done this before. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, and I'm like, well, let's just keep doing this. Let's just keep going with it. And so really my ultimate goal, and fortunately I have, some other people kind of just as crazy as I am, I guess. My ultimate goal really is so in at our convention this year, we are going to be showing the video. We're going to be honoring those 125 funeral directors, those with us and those no longer with us. We will be honoring them, and we have something that we are going to be giving to them. And I really wanted to take this a step further, and I feel like funeral directors deserve to be thanked every single day. But I also know in these circumstances, when you have these mass fatalities and you're called to go in and you're called in to do one job and one job only, and you're very seldom going to be interacting with families, that there's just something a little bit more unique and special about it. So I'm working on
At the time,
and
right?
I'm working on a challenge coin that we can actually either work with one of the national organizations or something that would be my ultimate goal, is to ensure that any funeral director that experiences one of these mass fatalities is thanked. And
Absolutely.
and then we are working on a little bit longer documentary that we've been asked to submit to public television. Um,
Sweet.
yeah, and it really all I want is our communities to understand the value of a funeral director, and I think too when we see more and more people think that they don't need to have a service, they don't need the funeral director or whatever. Um, I really want to bring that spotlight a little bit back to why you all are so important and why what you do is valuable to individual families and then collectively when we face these types of mass casualties.
Yeah, it's very important, and it's a good way to demonstrate what we do on a day to day basis. We talk all the time about trying to showcase what we do through our services, but another fantastic way to do that is, what do you think happens when these mass casualties occur? Like, what do you think happens when there's a natural disaster that occurs, or a 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, a mass shooting? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what it is. All of these things, for whatever reason, everyone else seems to get talked about.
yeah,
And I am not one. And most funeral directors are very humble. They don't need that. It's not what we do it for. It's not what it's about.
right.
But man, it sure would be nice, because it would give ourselves some more confidence to say, hey, what I'm doing is truly making an impact in the overall community and the overall purpose of it gives us more rhyme or reason for what we're doing, as opposed to like just putting our head down. It's like, we just have to get through this. Like, this is going to be hell. This is going to suck. We're seeing people that should not have died just die, but we have to do our job. Hey, like, let's show these funeral directors that they are loved, and the overall uh, concept of what you're trying to do, I think, is to to show the rest of the world and whoever else that what morticians do is something that cannot be taken away, which obviously we could never be taken. That's why we have, that's the best joke that anyone ever comes up to a mortician is like, oh, so you have the best job security ever. I was like, well, I guess, yeah, but like also it's it's changing all the time. It's never going to get taken away, but it sure
But
would
it's
help attract people.
changing.
It's
Yeah,
changing,
it's
sure.
changing so much, and you hear all these stories out there where I unfortunately there's those bad situations that give the good ones a bad name, and so it's really for
Yeah.
me, you know, um, the humility that exists in this profession is great. But I also think that it's as the funeral director, you have that humility as me on the flip side in the public, me watching what you do, me realizing that you've given of yourself 24/7, 365, that you've missed the Christmas dinners, you've dropped everything to go do this, you've missed vacations, all of that warrants me to say, I respect your humility, but I want to be able to say thank you, and I want to be able to recognize. And I think that's probably why, you know, a lot of us, or at least I can speak for myself, that aren't sitting in the funeral home, we're not meeting the families and doing the removals and the embalmings. That I'm going to sit here. If something happened tomorrow and one of my funeral homes needed me, I would be there, and so this is one way for us, and at least at our association, and hopefully we can take this to a bigger level, is just to say, you work hard and we want to recognize you, and I want the public to see you all as a necessity and not something that, oh my gosh, I got to go see the funeral director. Uh,
No one wants to do it. That's for
right. Feel
sure.
privileged
But
that you
it is
have somebody.
necessary.
Yeah. Feel privileged that you have somebody in your community that is willing to care for your loved one, care for you, and not just in the moment, but
Hold your
ongoing.
hand throughout. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that really was my again, it started off small. It's just like, well, let's just do this at convention, and then it just, I drive time and flying time are not good for me. Well, it's good for me. It's not good for other people. But, and I just really got to thinking that I wanted to do something special for them. And again, I've known so many of these people for for 23 years, and then a lot of them are gone. And I'm like, I didn't realize that this person was a part of that. And again, it's not just our little backyard space. It's everything that happens in this world that I just, these mass fatalities just have a different feel to them than the normal day-to-day death.
Yeah.
Just dealing with one, in this instance, it's 112.
Right. And in most of us funeral directors, we understand how to deal with the one situation. And to be honest with you, that is my least favorite thing to do, is when someone tragically passes away. It is horrific because the family, they don't even know how to process even for a second, in that next week. They don't even know what to think, what to do. And you're the one that has to step up to the plate, walk them through the process, hold their hand, take care of their loved one, make sure that everything goes the way that it should go, because they're not really thinking clearly in that moment. To imagine having to do that for, you know, dozens of people, hundreds of people, that's a different level of challenge that someone has to go through. And thankfully, we don't have to deal with it very often, but it happens
Yeah.
frequently, unfortunately, which is just a horrible thing to say, but it does. And I love what you're doing about showing the funeral directors that respect and that praise for what they deserve, and then showing the general public, hey, look at what these women and men are doing for our loved ones that have passed on. Like, they deserve your outpouring of love, and not the opposite. And unfortunately, we get too much of the opposite. I
We
think
do.
the trends are changing that away from that, because we're getting out there now into the communities more, and we're showing people online for what, take it for what you will. Some people can't stand it, some people are all for it. It's showing people the value of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So whether you hate or love it, most people I'm sure listening are on the loving it side of things. But we were getting the respect, and it's coming more, and through what you're doing is only going to amplify that. It's so beautiful. Give me your overarching, like, your dream, like, what would be your goal for this project?
Oh, I thought my overarching dream would be to win the lottery and take everybody on vacation. But okay, no, my overarching dream. Again, I where I'm at with this vision is just to ensure, and even if it's just I love that we have National Funeral Director and Mortician Day, and I love those things because I think it's
Today.
important. Um, it need I So here in our inner space with each other, whether we're at NFDA convention or ICCFA or state conventions, we're with our peers. And so we
Correct.
understand, we don't go around thanking each other, right? We don't go around patting each other on the back. We don't do all those things. So my goal really is to shine a light on this profession and the funeral directors to the public, to say, you know, yeah, there's some bad apples out there. We all know that, but have you really ever considered what they do and why they do it? And when you really think about our funeral is really that expensive when you boil it down to everything that you're getting. But I really want people to understand the compassion and the commitment that are in this profession, and in those funeral directors that step up to the plate, whether it's the single death or it's the 112 or whatever it is, that I want that recognition out there. And again, it's easy to do it when we're on our own stage, but the stage of the world, that's really my goals, to make certain that funeral directors are seen in a way that people understand that this is a compassion, committed, filled career. And that might be the other thing too, is that with the decline in people going to mortuary school, that maybe this might shed a little bit of a different light on the profession. And when somebody says, oh, I'm going to school to be a funeral director, that it's more of the, oh my gosh, what an incredible profession for you to be in, instead of, ooh, really?
Ooh, why?
Why, right?
What is
And
wrong
so
with
to
you?
really to show that side of it, and so it's really about that awareness and that that thank you that comes from outside of our profession, but also kind of making certain that we also do it on our own stage. And so I'm working to design, like I said, a kind of a challenge coin that I'm almost done with it, that's something that we can give to those funeral directors that have stepped up in these cases. And where that ends up, I don't know. I've thrown a few ideas out there that a couple of people have grabbed onto that said that they'd help me with. And so we'll see where it goes. If it doesn't leave my backyard, I'm okay with that too, because I still get to stand with all my peers and colleagues in one room and say thank you to the 125 that were there that day on July 19th, 1989.
Oh, got the chills. I really do. It's beautiful. And we appreciate you stepping up and doing this for all those funeral directors and their families, because it's going to mean a lot to the families of those funeral directors to know that they're getting credit for what they've done. And a lot, like you said, a lot of them have never talked about it, and then to bring it up, especially this many years later, and they're able to be remembered for that, for the ones who have passed on to, is just an amazing tribute. And that's what this is all about. And that's what today is all about. National Funeral Directors Today, or National Funeral Directors Day. To all of our people in funeral service, you know how we feel about it. We love what you do, and we know it's hard, and we know it's a grind, but what you're doing is the work of it's an indescribable amount of work that you have to do that goes under the radar. But we know deep down inside in ourselves, in our community, the importance and the meaning of what we do. And it's a connection with each other, a connection with whatever you might believe in the afterlife. There's a connection there, and there's a connection to those families. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to all of us in funeral service, and just keep going with it. It's hard, but just keep going with it. And you deserve all of the honor and the credit that Danielle's trying to bring to you. And hopefully you get some of that today.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the time to be able to be here and share this story. And, we're hoping that we'll have a really nice documentary to share with everybody real soon. And so thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Everyone keep a lookout for that. If you're going to the Iowa Funeral Directors Convention, you'll see it there live. And then hopefully we can get our hands on that after, Danielle. We're dying to see it. Pun intended.
I'll let you have it. Yeah.